Story. So the time is 7 minutes past. So we have Mayor Fias, thank you for being here. Councillor Joe Whitworth, Deputy Cabinet Member for Planning and Development, Air Quality and Climate Emergency. Vicky Clark, Corporate Director of Inclusive Economy and Housing. And Ellie Cooper, who's the Policy Manager. Thank you for coming here. I'm going to quickly whiz round. I'm going to ask our colleagues on screen to introduce themselves. Rachel, just go first.
Councillor Rachel Tripp.
Mahmood.
Councillor Mahmood Mirza.
I'll start off.
Councillor Zabur Longson.
Councillor Susan Masters, East South.
Councillor Tony McCormick.
Councillor Nate Higgins, Stratford Olympic Park.
Councillor Simon Rush, Pastor West Kennington East.
Michael.
Michael Carr, Scrutiny Manager, Young Council.
And Councillor Paul, the Chair of the committee. Right, okay, any apologies for absence? No? Oh, Lester Hudson won't be attending tonight and Ken Penton might be late.
Apologies,
Okay.
Chair. I'm going to have to log off at 9 p.m. as well. I'm really sorry.
That's fine. So Rachel, that's fine. So if you've got questions, I'll happily bring you in first. Yeah, okay. That's lovely. So we've got questions and obviously we're going to go into the second part of the meeting. So we had a good session last time on the affordable housing and social housing. This pick today is to cover off green spaces, flood protection, climate resilience, faith and worship space, and affordable workspace. Those are the outstanding items of the last meeting. What we have in terms of finishing off the issues and topics from the last meeting, we have been sent, and thank you, officers and the mayor, for this. You should have it on your computers, but there's been some hard copies there. Apologies, but it has been quite extensive, take a little bit of time to put together, but we have got these. So the first question, I'm going to go on. Mayor and officers, are there any introductions you want to make or introductory remark before we go on?
If I may, Chair, just to say two things really. One, we thoroughly enjoyed the last session on the 12th of December, it was from recollection, and we enjoyed the range of questions that were being asked relating to the local plan and the local plan review process. We appreciate the planning in the round can be quite a complex matter, and there's quite a number of competing and seemingly contradictory concepts that one needs to hold, but we were very encouraged by the range of questions, so thank you. And then secondly, in terms of additional questions that were asked, as the Chair has noted, we've submitted responses, additional questions, and I just wanted to apologise for the late dispatch at our end, but I trust that you find them useful and helpful, and happy to receive any questions once those have been digested properly by members, and we can provide some additional written responses or indeed respond to them at a future meeting.
And there was obviously we had a debate on the, I'll get my terminology right, it was the Green motion amended by Labour on the social affordable homes, and there was a commitment to provide, let's call it an implementation note on how that was going to be incorporated into our planning policy. I think that's about right. So that's still outstanding, right?
It is. We literally just agreed. So the approach is to write those targets into the Regulation 19 plan. We've just agreed the draft wording of those, so we can circulate that to the committee.
Lovely.
It's helpful.
Just wanted to put a record, but it's in the train, and just to remind the committee that's what we've got to wait for. Next.
I think the thing, sorry, I should say, Councillor. Oh, we already didn't.
Okay, we've done it.
The kind of issue that's been a contention is about whether the plan will require 50% social housing on each development as part of their consent, or if it will aim to deliver 50% social housing overall. And there's a lot of skepticism about the second plan, and that's part of what led to the motion. It was agreed in both the Green version and the Labour version that we should have it as part of the consent for each application. I'm just checking that that distinction is working its way through into the application of the motion.
They're writing it at the moment. People were nodding. So let's let the drafting conclude and
Said that they've just finished drafting the wording, so I was just checking if that's reflected in
Yeah,
it.
the wording is that it's a per site target.
Perfect, thank you very much.
the record note, but people were nodding.
It's in accordance with the motion.
We're all aligned, Nay. Okay, right. Before we open to questions, any reflection remarks you want to make or setting scenes?
No, I mean,
Straight in.
no, I mean, I guess I would say we kind of set the scene quite thoroughly, I think, last time round, just to flag as well that we're obviously happy to answer the questions on those three outstanding areas for them first time. And there's also quite a very lengthy and thorough answer that Ellie's prepared for you on the student housing issue.
Yeah.
Apologies that you did get it quite recently, but again, if there's anything that leaps out that you want to ask questions on about that tonight, then we're happy to pick that up as well.
I'm going to, obviously, we've got the key lounge inquiry. I'm going to, in any particular order, which the members might wanted to do that, right? So I'm not going to be prescriptive. You ask the questions you want. What I'm going to do is go, first of all, before I do that, are there any declarations of interest in this meeting before we proceed? No? Great. Rachel, you got a declaration?
Same as last time, only just to declare so that the minutes are thorough that I'm the chair of Strategic Development Committee.
Lovely.
Well,
And-
I declare that I'm also on strategic development.
You've done it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Rachel, do you have a question at all from last meeting or anything that's piqued your interest on this meeting?
I do. I was looking at the papers that came through today, dealing with some of the questions we tackled last time. And I just wanted to be completely sure that I understood the difference on the table in Appendix 2 about the percentage of affordable homes, about the difference between gross and net completions. I'm sorry, I did puzzle over it for a while. I wondered if you could talk me through that, please.
Yeah, so gross is the number that have been built, and net would minus off any that have been demolished.
So if you're taking a block of flats that had 20 homes in and you have to knock those down to start again and you build 50, then gross is 50 and net is 30.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. I know that last time when we were asking about progress of the homes for social rent against our manifesto pledges, you mentioned, Vicky, that there was a board, I think, apologies, I don't remember the name of it, that met regularly to look at progress on that. And I just wanted to double check that the information in the table that we've got here is the information that goes to that board, and whether the totals are then kind of rag rated, if you like, over the course of the 4-year electoral cycle to let us know, to let that group know where we are in terms of achieving what we need to.
Sorry, Ray, am I asked for a repeat?
Of course you can.
Councillor Tripp, please could you repeat the first bit of that question? I caught the end, but not the first half.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, this is not ideal. At the last meeting, you mentioned a board that meets regularly. I think it was a homes board or housing board, like an internal Newham board that would be reviewing the numbers of homes built. And I guess having seen the appendix I just referred to,
Housing Delivery Board.
that's the one. Yes, that's
Yeah.
it.
What's it
and
called,
I just
Vicky?
Let me get you. The new.
Oh,
I think I understand the question now.
Far away.
Shall I answer and then
Yeah. And could people,
if you can hear us again, Rachel?
if people project voices because of microphones as well?
Of course. Okay, so the meeting in question is the Newham Strategic Housing Delivery meeting. And that's a meeting where we meet monthly with relevant officers and relevant cabinet members to review progress against our strategic housing targets. And I think Rachel's question was, were the kind of end of term statistics that Ellie had produced for this paper, the same statistics that we reviewed at that meeting? And the answer is that they are not always, they are that this set that Ellie has, if you like, is the final audited statistics in each case. What we are typically reviewing at that meeting is the month-on-month progress of the sites that we are trying to progress at that moment. We'll be getting a RAG rating of how those particular sites are going and how many homes those are projected to produce. And we're principally looking at the homes which are under our direct auspices.
Okay.
Whereas Ellie's figures will also incorporate social and affordable homes delivered by private developers as well. So it's a quite slightly different set of consideration.
Rachel, supplementary?
Please. I suppose then
You're frozen. Go on,
I
Rach.
still have the question
Rachel?
about where and how we keep an account over the 4-year electoral term of how we're doing in terms of delivering on the manifesto pledge, because obviously that would represent the total of homes for social rent on private or Newham developments. And you know, depending on where you kind of draw the line in terms of whether you're looking at the actual completions or the move-ins or permissions granted, or I suppose I'm hoping for some kind of assurance. As I looked through the list of numbers, I was sort of applying the kind of filter of when the elections had happened, and you can quite clearly see when our political focus became very firmly on social homes. But it's then knowing about the kind of follow-up to that and how we know how close we are to meeting the pledges that we've made.
So that group also maintains a running tally of the target in terms of the ones that Newham are directly responsible for.
Okay, right. Happy, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean,
It's allocated by, attributed to electoral term, if that's your specific question.
Yeah, and also to know that we're keeping a tally of the social homes delivered by private developers as well.
And just a question, how is that audited, that list? How do we know it's correct?
The list
I've produced, there is a very extensive, sorry, I'm losing my voice slightly, but I will try and project through it. So we are required by government annually to submit a starts and completions list that indicates how many homes overall are starting and completing. And we do that through the GLA. They coordinate that for London boroughs. And there is an incredibly large and complicated spreadsheet with every planning application on it that my team keeps a track of. And each summer we go out and also check which sites have started and which have completed, sometimes doing site visits as well to check that.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to move on to affordable workspace. That's okay with the committee. Okay. Susan?
How do you work out what our sort of strategic needs are for affordable workspace? And is there any sort of deep dive into different industries and needs within that workspace?
So from a local plan perspective, we look at employment land requirements in the round, and we produce an employment land study. That looks broadly at what the market is indicating it wants to deliver, and looks at kind of broad trends in occupancy rates and rents within different sectors of employment land. That came to the broad conclusion that there's still a fair amount of, I think we discussed last time, this difference between affordable workspace where planning secures a discount in the rent, like affordable housing, and low cost workspace where it's just cheaper because it is slightly poorer quality or in a slightly kind of less prestigious location. And the employment land review indicated that broadly there is a sufficient supply in Newham of lower cost office and industrial workspace to meet need. But we've also been working with colleagues in the Economic Regeneration Service, and obviously the work that they've been doing in delivering the levelling up funding projects, where they've been looking at specific pockets and types of industries and workspace that we want to encourage in the borough, and where kind of more affordable workspace might be required to deliver that. And the local plan supports the delivery of those affordable workspace projects.
Can I supplement you to that? Obviously, since COVID, the bedroom has been the biggest source of low-cost workspace in the country. How has that affected? Because you gave two definitions at the start of your COVID, everyone's got their bedroom, everyone's got their Wi-Fi. How does that impact what you're doing? So my question is, how do we ensure we don't get too much of something we don't need?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. So the kind of initial outlook looked like the need for office plummeted drastically and the need for industrial workspace, particularly warehousing to service logistics, increased rapidly. And that, you know, those trends kind of peaked because of COVID, but they're kind of, you know, more broad, you know, continuing more broadly and beyond that. And so the Employment Land Review looks very specifically at those two different types of workspace, and we seek to allocate land accordingly. So we've really sought to protect our industrial space and protect it as productive space and, you know, deliver more intensive types of industrial. So not just low-rise single sheds, but also stacked industrial typologies to get more activity on that land. And an office, we haven't allocated as much land towards that type of development.
One thing we are seeing in some emerging developments is that particularly developments where they have got a number of 1 and 2 bedroom flats that they're expecting perhaps in some cases young professionals to use is that they are starting to make provision for co-working spaces as part of kind of the communal space in those facilities as well. I don't think that's necessarily something you've specifically tasked them with. It's rather that they've the developers have identified that might be something that's attractive to their incoming tenants who they expect to be working from home some of the time.
And if I may just add, part of what informs the seemingly rolling London plan review. So once the London plan's concluded and adopted, commencement of the next London plan more or less start pretty much straight away. But the GLA will undertake, as part of its research and analysis around London's growth trajectory, the London economic needs in terms of workspace and what types of workspace. And as Ellie has said, during the COVID-19 period and the immediate aftermath, the prognosis was that there was going to be a massive decline, as referenced in many newspaper articles, but actually the long-term prospects for London was that that type of office space, including affordable, would be required. Point that I wanted to emphasise is that there's a local plan response to the requirements around affordable workspace that are in part informed by the London plan. And in addition, there's the localised context, and that will be informed by our prognosis around the character of our local economy as is and the character of our local economy as we're trying to engineer. And in the next few months, we will be publishing our local industrial strategy, which talks to that latter point, because yes, we've had the inclusive growth strategy and the community wealth building strategy, but what's been absent is the type of economy we want to be shaping given the growth sectors of the London economy, and that's going to be coming through as part of providing some clarity around the direction. And that will then help inform furthermore any local plan considerations or strategic considerations as the council.
Ellie, you mentioned 2 definitions of workplace. Could you just, not now, but just email it to Yessie so we can keep it in the minutes? Because I think it's quite a useful definition.
I think it's in the original Chloe's answer.
Fine. And also, and it's useful thing there about looking at that, I call it the industrial workspace is also important as well, not just office. That's great. Okay, Susan, you happy with that answer?
I was quite interested in the comments about 2-bed flats, and I mean, I'm assuming that's our quite high-end private developments that are putting in this communal space, or is it generally happening
it's
across the board?
It seems to be happening. So the development that I most recently visited that had that was a development which had both affordable and private rented housing in it. So
When you say affordable, do you mean social rent?
Yeah. So I think it is something which people are seeing a need for across the board. And I think it makes sense because you know, the alternative is to design each flat with significant additional space for home working, and obviously that becomes problematic then in producing, in creating those flats at a value which people can actually afford to rent. So it seems like it will be interesting to see how it takes off, but it seems like an interesting approach.
Are we monitoring it on that level?
We haven't formally monitored it, but I think all of us often get asked to visit new developments and then to come back and see how they're going and things like that. So we will certainly be kind of informally following with interest, and it is something that we can also keep an eye on how many are coming forward with that kind of proposal in them.
Brilliant. I want to move on to faith and worship space. Are there any questions from the committee at all?
Yeah,
Susan?
No, I think Tony got.
if you want to go first.
Don't, like you can have a fight about it. It's okay. That's quite chilled. Be brief, Tony, and to the point, please.
My concern is, when we were here the last time, it was mentioned that there is a register of faith groups. I've now seen that register. Most of those faith groups there, especially the area of the emerging churches. And when I talked about.
And the question is, Tony?
When I talk about established churches, it's the Catholic and the Anglican, etc. So, how do we engage in this faith group? Because in my experience, there isn't any meaningful engagement.
That's the question.
Yep.
Tony, is that the question?
Are these faith groups existing? Do you know that they're existing?
I think the question is, we've got a faith register. How often do we keep it updated? Would that be a fair summary of the question, Tony?
Okay, so corporately, the council has data sets of organisations that make up Newham's diverse voluntary community and faith sector. That is updated corporately for different parts of the council to access and use and disseminate information. That's supplemented by a variety of different means of engagement with residents and stakeholders across a range of issues. When it comes to local plan matters, it is really important that the local planning authority is demonstrating that it is approaching its engagement in an equitable way, yes, and utilising the resources that it has at its disposal, including those of the council. So it's for the council corporately to refresh, continue, and it's for the local planning authority to demonstrate that it is discharging its local planning authority duty when it comes to publishing making an impending planning application in line with the requirements of public consultation. I would welcome a view from the planning officer by the chair on whether it could be construed by a planning inspectorate, or if something was judicially reviewed, that if the local planning authority directed its engagement with a specific grouping in a locality, would that be seen as unfair?
If we made it so that only that group could engage, then absolutely it would be considered unfair. Looking to widen our engagement as much as possible would be considered, completely in keeping with what our requirements are.
If I bring the mood in, just to supplementary. So we've got a list of faith groups which is updated on a regular basis. So which you could, as per directed by the local plan, you could engage in the appropriate faith group. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is the approach that we took.
So hold on. What is very brief supplementary, Tony, because I've got 4 people coming in.
Big groups.
The question is, Tony.
That it seems to be disadvantaged most, that it seems to be here. And therefore, they're not getting representation, especially when you're consulting. Yeah.
Right. Can I just hold on? Right. You have a list which you go out and you update. Is that correct?
It's a list that's corporately owned and the council updates it.
Right.
If there are concerns by any members that it doesn't sufficiently capture a particular religious group, then that's certainly something that I can take back to both the chief executive and the resident engagement team, because they are charged with maintaining those lists. Notwithstanding that, the point that you've made, the local planning authority, in all of its consultations relating to the local plan, will push it out as far and as wide as it can within using the instruments at its disposal, including sending information to councillors for them to disseminate amongst their social groups, because I would find it, I would imagine for any organisation to cover every single organisation in the voluntary community faith sector would be difficult, but that's not to say that the council should equally not be challenged in making sure that there's engagement across the board.
John, small go on.
Just a small point, yes, to respond to Councillor McCalmont. Councillor Easter, Commissioner for Faith, has confirmed that the list is up to date.
Great, thank you. Mahmood. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. I have been approached by various mosques and Muslim organization. They are feeling they've been left out, from the local development plan. That they have not been consulted. Especially, they're worried about the burial place for Muslim community. I would say not just for Muslim community, but other communities as well. There's a pressing need for a burial ground in London Borough of Newham. We don't have a place here. We've been using a Garden of Peace, which is in Redbridge, and which is almost full, and it's got about 4 or 5 years left. The amount of space is being taken every day by day.
Mahmood,
So,
is the question
Yes,
to be
sir.
helpful? What are we doing with regard burial space for the Muslim community and other non-established faiths? That fair summary of your question?
Yes.
Right, let's get an answer.
Okay, so I'm making a couple of assumptions that the question has in large part been driven by a letter that a number of councillors received on Friday from a coalition of mosques relating to Muslim burial space in the borough. And just to advise members of this committee, there have been long-standing conversations stemming from circa late 2019 with the Gardens of Peace, and a consideration in relation to the availability of burial space for those that practice the Muslim faith. And it has been acknowledged that in the context of burial space provision, it's constrained given the increase in that particular faith. There has been a series of conversations at senior corporate director level with the Gardens of Peace for a period and for obvious reasons it had to pause because of COVID-19, and it's something that it has been picked up again since last year, and we're due to be having a meeting with Gardens of Peace in the next couple of months. The issue in Newham, well, there's a couple of things, and I'll have to invite Vicky and Ellie to talk through some of the technical detail. There are sub-regional arrangements across across clusters of boroughs with regards to burial space provision for all faiths as well as particular faiths. I know in the context of Newham, the local plan review, because a number of mosques would have been sent notification about the local plan review, Regulation 18. The only response that we received with regards to burial space provision was actually the London Borough of Redbridge. No mosques or any other places of worship provided us any responses to the Regulation 18, as far as I'm aware, but I could be corrected by planning officers. And we know that a challenge in Newham is that we don't have sufficient space for the type of burial provision that will be required,
They go outside.
and we may have to look outside. So we're currently
Okay.
exploring different options, and as I said, we'll be arranging meetings with Gardens of Peace, but also this
Yeah.
coalition.
Okay, Vicky,
Yeah, just to add that the challenge that we have in finding space within the borough is the requirement that woods and burial sites should be virgin rather than
Yeah.
previously developed land. And the difficulty that we have from a kind of it's not safe to put burial space in areas of flood risk. So essentially, a lot of the undeveloped land in Newham is closer to the river, and therefore it's not appropriate for it to be used. And so essentially, once you overlay the various criteria, you do not generate a list of large scale opportunities.
just to, really, is it possible, because obviously we all got the letter about the burial space, I think, and it's not a solution we could solve now. Is there a position statement, a statement of where we are? So what's the data, what's the numbers, what are the options? Because there's two things. If you're going to go outside and provision a burial space, that takes time, right? However, there's burial space in Newham, which is existing, which might need to be modified or small changes to make it more acceptable. So is there possible to have like a note to say what our position is and the chronology of when we're looking at?
Okay, I can certainly provide you an overview. I would need to discuss with Vicky and other corporate directors, because different departments and services involved. I'd welcome if you'd be happy to wait until I've concluded my meetings with Gardens of Peace and the
When is your meeting with?
I mean, it's got to be set up, it was meant to be set up
Okay.
this January. We can certainly give you an overview.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion? And Mahmood, I'm looking, if you nod, so I think, can we have like a position statement of where we are? So for example, Woodlands Burial Space, what's the number, what's the requirement, where are we? Just a statement of fact and a chronology. So there's a meeting with Gardens of Peace to look at new space. The second question in my mind is, are we making use of existing space? For example, particular rituals around washing. So have we got those facilities and the sort of there's existing and new use? Could we have a note?
Yeah.
I suspect lots of councillors are going to be asking the question anyway. We all got
So, I mean, actually, to that point, having noted the letter and subject to discussions with Vicky and some other officers, because I've not had a chance to flag the letter with them, I was thinking about sending a briefing note to all members in any case.
Yeah.
Just to bring everyone up to speed as to some of the complexities.
Yeah.
The issues in London wide, because in my conversations with the Gardens of Peace over the last coming up to 4.5 years, as well as conversations with national government, with the GLA as well, the sort of desktop exercise around need in East London, some of the pressures that facilities and provision like the Garden of Peace are facing, some of the regulatory issues that communities of faith communities will need to be alert to. So I know that there are other Muslim faith provision facilities in the borough, but there's also it's a very, and for understandable reasons, a very highly regulated arena because of the safety and health and safety requirements.
But you can put us on.
Yeah, and I can provide a little overview for.
Because I think the statement is where we are today, where we are. Meeting with Gardens of Peace, and there's really two options, isn't there? If we have to get new cemetery space, what does that look like in the timeline? Got existing cemetery space, could we make better use? Is it fit for purpose? Mahmood, so what we committed to is getting a note and hopefully you raise the issue. It will go to all councillors. And in that note, the mayor and the team will set out what the next steps are and what the signposts. is that a useful holding position?
Yeah,
to
it
your
is
question?
useful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely. I've got, good question, Mahmood, by the way. I've got Nate, then I've got Susan, then I've got Rachel. You are correct, Susan, so you can go now and then Nate after.
Okay, so I'm really interested in what the current thinking is around faith spaces in building originally have a different sort of classification. Look at faith assessment of need across the borough, because obviously we've got a shifting borough, we've got shifting populations. How that's assessed and how we look at sort of meeting these different parts.
Okay.
Given the 15-minute neighbourhood.
That's the question.
Thank you.
Who's going to answer it?
Can I just provide just some introductory remarks? Because it's a really important question that you've asked. And from the outset, embarking on the local plan review, one of the most interesting areas of discussion that we had as colleagues with planning officers was thinking about, yes, the 15-minute neighbourhood concept, but actually profoundly the practice of faith and how it is a important identity marker for so many of our residents. And given the fact that we live in a pluralistic society, so the practice of faith is such in different parts of the world that going to a place of worship is a walk away. It's within the heart of the community. That was a early starting point that then led the planning officer teams to start thinking about it within that framework. But yeah.
So I think lots of people here are aware of the kind of current local plan policy, which is very much a kind of town centre first approach for community facilities, including faith facilities. So that looks very much at folks located within our native town centres. And that does have some advantage in that it brings people into the town centres, helps create spend there. They're often our most kind of well-connected places, so people get there easily. But it does leave large gaps in the rest of the borough where it's harder to walk to faith facilities. And it also means that community and faith facilities are competing for space with other uses that also need to be located in town centres. So it can increase the cost of that space. So the new approach in the local plan is to take a kind of two-tier approach for smaller faith facilities, and smaller community facilities can be located in areas outside of this. So those might be part of neighbourhood parades, where traditionally we've always just looked to have shops, or community facilities like parks, so that you get the kind of creation of kind of small hubs of community activity. To kind of surround any impact would allow many more locations where smaller faith and community facilities can take place, help kind of create that 15-minute network that at the plan centre.
Yeah, quick introduction, Dylan, go.
There's a really interesting point that Ellie's flagged, and this relates to the local plan position as is, with the current local plan that we had to adopt in December 2018. And this idea that town provision for places of worship, I must admit, I've always been puzzled as to what was the rationale. And I think it was, and this is not current planning policy officers or planning policy officers of the past, I think there was a profound misunderstanding of places of worship and the importance of them being at the heart of localized communities at a hyper-local level. And this idea that places of worship, be they churches or mosques, would drive people traffic to town centres to help then a corresponding shopping, benefit is really bizarre. And that suggests to me there was perhaps a wider institutional lack of understanding around faith and places of worship and their social value within the heart of communities at a hyper-local level over an economic value, a definition being applied.
Right, I'm gonna have to I'm going to extend standing orders to 9:30 first. And then I'm going to swap Rachel and Nate around because Rachel's got to leave by 9 o'clock. So I move at the time of the meeting to be extended to up to half an hour to close by 9:30. 11 of the council procedures. I have the second. Right, I don't propose to be here till 9. Thank you. Rachel, you want to come in your question?
Thank you. Sorry, my sound is
Then
breaking
you're
up a
next,
bit.
mate.
I'm going to speak a little bit more slowly in case I cut out in the middle of words. I wanted to say thank you to the Mayor and to Vicky for the information about burial sites. Obviously, I had the letter as well, and to know some of the context and the work that's going on is really, really useful. Just to come back for a moment to the question about engagement, which is obviously, one hopes, something that's happening, and of course, also not every organisation can respond to something like a local plan consultation or may not realise how important it is. We were sent an attachment with a list of 16 organisations, faith organisations, that presumably cannot be the list that is being referred to, that is kept up to date and that Anne Easter has checked. And sorry, I can see Vicky's raised her hand. Perhaps she wants to come in.
Yeah. Got an answer for you.
I had the same thought, and then I realised that there were a number of tabs across the bottom, and there are approximately 250 Christian churches, 120 Muslim organisations, and a number of organisations from different faiths as well. So basically, they are grouped by faith, and then multi-faith organisations at the end. When I opened my copy, it went straight to the multi-faith tab, which is that smaller list, but it's a much more substantial list.
That makes so much sense. Thank you.
If you click on the tabs at the bottom, you'll see the fuller list.
I think we have a PDF,
Lovely.
which I think we can't
Nate.
click on the tabs.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. There was one.
That might be a problem then. You should.
Go on.
There was one final
Go on,
part of my
Rachel.
question, which was just about engagement with faith organisations about planning. And it's probably not for now, but I just wonder whether there's something that we could do to help faith organisations, be that on a religious basis or an individual institution basis, to understand the planning process a bit better and to understand some of the opportunities of responding to the local plan, but also some of the restrictions, and how we could do that in a way that brought people together and increased their literacy.
Brilliant. What are we doing proactively with faith organisations to understand the local plan?
Okay, I have numerous meetings with different groups, individual groups and collective groups on different matters pertaining to the local plan and planning and aspects of planning to explain. And we have, do you want to talk through some of the deep dive type of conversations we've had with?
Can I narrow that question down? So Cabinet in June will authorise the local plan to go to consultation. What plans do you have at that point to go out to the 200 odd faith groups? Or will you have a plan?
We will have a plan. So
Thank you.
Can I also, if I may, Chair, you know, our local planning authority team, they actually won an award for the best community consultation on a local plan review process in 2023 at the tail end. And that should be commended. Of every single local planning authority in England, they achieved an award.
Okay, can you send us some details of that? I'm going to include it in a minute. But the plan in June is going to get to consultation. I think in order to take the sense of what's been said, could there be some sort of full engagement with all the 14 tabs, 200 odd organisations? Yeah. So when the local plan comes up, there's some sort of town hall meeting and you can explain where you are and what you're doing. Could that be an opportunity?
It can, absolutely. Yeah, last time around, we did offer to the Faith Forum to attend and provide a tailored presentation to what they were interested in. It wasn't an offer that was taken up at that time, but I know that kind of interest has kind of snowballed. So I'm sure it will be something that will be more of an interest this time.
Just a suggestion, if I think we sent the scrutiny officers the the document in an Excel format. I understand why they PDF'd it, but obviously that's just caused that misapprehension. So I don't think we have any issue with it being sent round in its raw Excel format to make sure everyone can see all the tabs. So if it could be recirculated after the meeting, then you will all be able to check and see the list.
And also putting Mahmood's question and Tony's together, I think June would be a really good time to go out to the faith organisation at that time. The debate on Muslim burial space would have moved on. And obviously at that point, you know, I know Councillor McCormick will be taking it upon himself to go to the numerous black and newer churches to ensure they're all on the list, right? Of course. And I think it'd be a beautiful place to, yeah, great. Lovely. Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Right. So we've got on that bit a briefing. Sorry, go on, Nate.
Sorry, yeah, it was my question next.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What was it? Cool. So in my view, the biggest or maybe second biggest failure of the Olympics project is the failure to build faith space in the Olympic Park. Just looking at the map that we've been given, my knowledge of ward boundaries isn't perfect, but I think ours might be the only ward with 0 faith places of worship. But the community neighbourhood with the least is the Beckton and Royal Docks. And I'm just thinking with Docklands 2.0 kind of on the horizon, we need to fix what went wrong now so that it doesn't happen again. And there was a motion for council that I actually put an amendment into, so I was sad to see it not come forward, which is essentially asking the mayor and the interfaith commissioner to figure out how we can use this local plan process this from happening. Essentially what's happening is that the landlords are refusing to let to faith institutions. I don't think that's legal under the Equality Act, and yet it's happening, and it's not just one landlord, it's all of the landlords in the Olympic Park. And so I'm just, is there something we can do in the local plan is the first question, and then because we have referenced on local plan things, is there a way that we can assess the legality of this as a council?
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vicky, Ellie, in the context of the Regulation 19 version that will go out for consultation, and in the context of the Stratford Olympic Park ward and the development as is, and there's very little scope of development, and any development that's going to be completed has already been given planning approval. I think it's going to be limited, but Ellie can talk to the south of the borough and the general principles around faith, places of worship, faith provision within the Regulation 19. On the point as to the illegalities of what those developers are doing and those companies that are managing those spaces, it is something I'm raising at the London Legacy Development Corporation body, and I've raised it at the board. I'm having conversations with the chief executive, and I've also begun to have conversations. I started conversations it was the year before last with, Get Living, and it's something that I've been having some quite interesting exchanges around, and they're quite keen to see what they can do to help support faith provision, because I've come across quite a lot of faith practitioners from across faiths, not just one particular faith. And I've also raised it at corporate director level, is there a way in which we, if not on in the actual Stratford Olympic Park ward, because we don't own the land and all the developments happened, is there something that we could look at scoping out in the vicinity, in the boundary, that we could encourage a faith community to build? The two big communities that I've been getting requests of, Muslim and Christian communities, and I've been also speaking to some faith representatives from those religions to see if we can organise and coordinate a campaign. So work is underway, but so I just wanted to give you that assurance that stuff is underway.
Ellie, you want to add to those comments? Because I think you got an answer. Ellie, anything to add?
No, just so the local plan looks to require new developments on site allocations where there is an under provision to bring forward some form of community facility that should be discussed at that point in time, what it would, the use of which it would best serve the local community, and that should be consulted on with that local community. So there are new hooks in the new plan to try and bring forward further community facilities, particularly in new parts of the borough where whole town centres will be created from scratch. And as part of the work we did on Documents 2.0, there was, some master planning work that was being done to think about the capacity of that site to inform the business case for the DLR. And we said, look, in Newham, this is the average number of community facilities we have in a town centre. That should be what gets modelled in here. There was it wasn't quite it was a significantly more space than usually Homes England would consider in that type of exercise, but we thought it was really important.
Just quickly, and just really to say, the points raised with members of the London Legacy Development Corporation Board, including the Chief Executive and the Chairman, have not gone, they're not unsympathetic to the point. They are actually really open, because my ongoing evolving argument is that actually we've now got communities that are maturing and they're embedding, and actually this is a place that you want to bring up their families and have long, healthy lives. And we need to be thinking, how can we provide this type of provision that was ignored or forgotten?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in just very briefly.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. I guess I would say that I kind of somewhat see the LLDC as part of the problem. Like, I think from what I've understood, some faith organisations have struggled to get whether the LLDC is the landowner, like at the Timber Lodge, for example. Even with them, they struggle.
Okay.
So that's the first point. The second point is it would be really great if we could think about engaging the council's lawyers to look at whether this is legal.
Okay. I think the mayor's given a commitment. She started some work with the LLDC and the chairman. I think it's the mayor could update us on her travails, and I think I think we got a really good answer there, actually. Zubair.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, how many Muslim burial in the new home? So far, because mostly I used to already Romford Road. Romford Road cemetery is almost full up now. It's packed already because a lot of people coming from the out of the borough as well. And I can notice for that, Garden of the Peace, they have already very helpful on pandemic times. I'm very glad for that. But nowadays they don't have much space left as well. So I just want to know, you can just look it for that. It's very helpful.
Fair point of clarification. I think there's a commitment already to provide a note.
Provide the information in terms of.
I went to visit the Gardens of Peace on Sunday, and it was
beautiful.
It is very beautiful, very interesting, and I think I'm not a planner, but I think there might be a lot more we can do with existing provision. And we've got existing provision, and there's got to be a route towards the new provision. I think that path needs to be mapped out, I think. But I think the note would be a useful holding. Vicky.
If I may, Chair, just to say that the issue of it needing to be virgin space is very important to be previously unused land, and in particular it can't be land that anyone else has been buried directly in.
Yeah.
So in terms of existing provision, to the extent that would be possible, it would be about previously unused sections of existing graveyards. It can't be easily about densifying existing sites. So I can assure you, and we will cover this in the note, that we have had several exploratory conversations with those colleagues who are most informed about existing provision as to whether there are any or many opportunities for using existing provision within the borough, and there isn't a great deal available there. We have had conversations, and we will get this detail into the note, about modelling expected levels of requirement, and therefore at what point the issue, as councillors have suggested, becomes very, very acute. We know we're getting close to that, which is why we're taking it so seriously. And we are also in contact with we've been working on, if we can't provide in borough, where are the most sensible and closest other places that we can provide it, and those conversations.
I agree, and I would say, with the cabinet giving authority for the consultation to start in June, I do think that is a perfect opportunity after that point to meet and discuss with those groups who are interested in Muslim burial space, and there are other faith groups as well, just to begin that dialogue. I think that's very, very important and a key opportunity. But I think the point's been well made by Rachel, Mahmood and Zubair. If you get a chance, councillors, do go and visit. I went on a Sunday, really good place. I'm going to move on. So there's three last things which I'm going to group together. We've got biodiversity, green space, flood protection and climate resilience. Any questions in those areas?
Yeah, have we skipped student and graduate housing as a follow-up from, because we've got
No, we've got,
like,
all right, we've got the note
a
here.
big submission, but
Yeah,
things to talk about from that submission.
okay, but we've got the note, which
Yeah.
so if I'm thinking, if we had read this note at that time, which you haven't done.
I have read it in quite a lot of detail, but
Okay, so what I want to do is to move on to the other three. If you've got one good super question,
yes,
right?
have.
One good super question with no three supplementaries. So,
we'll see. As part of the modelling of how many homes you need for sharers, what percentage of sort of students studying in Newham and then staying in Newham have you used?
full stop. Question was given.
I might need to give more detail to the question, but
No three clauses to your question, Nate.
I can come back in a bit more detail and a written answer on that, because it doesn't, we won't necessarily know why they are living in Newham or what they were doing in Newham. We will look at household composition more generally, using census data, and also using things like the council tax data that tells us whether households are students or not. But we're not surveying residents to understand what their future intentions might be or why it is that they're currently living in the borough.
okay. I'll use the chair's distraction to ask.
Okay. Right, because I want to ensure.
Questions.
No. I'm gonna help you out here, right? I want to ensure you get a good answer. You mind putting it on paper?
What
I want-
I was going to ask is whether we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting,
Yeah.
so that we can have more in detail questions.
Okay. I tell you what, I need to look at the timetable of that meeting, all right? Let's see if we can do that. If not, I'm gonna get the issue to come back to you, stick it on writing, so I want to get a full answer. Is that fair, right? Because I want to go into the climate change bit.
Chair, if I may also a polite request through the chair to Councillor Higgins, because I'm interested in the question, because I know that he's raised
Yeah, before.
points, and what will be helpful so that we understand
Yeah.
where this is coming from. If you can just provide us an overview
Yeah,
of what your concerns are.
I don't want to rush your question, Nate.
But the concern broadly is that we invest quite a lot of time and money and just energy in talking about bringing students to Newham. And the context though is if you graduate as a student, it's very difficult to make Newham your home
Okay.
outside of the Olympic area. And obviously that means that lots of people are moving to my area, but I want all of Newham to have the same benefit.
Just have a quick with the officers. We're going to look at whether we can timetable on the 21st. If not, we're going to invite you to write it down, get your full answer. Okay. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
I don't want your question rushed. I want to, okay.
Helpful, thank you.
So biodiversity, green spaces and flood protection. Any questions, Simon?
On this one. Thank you, Chair. I'll go straight for it with regard to flood protection. Something I've noticed when I'm out and about is.
It is.
Right. Replacing gardens with car parking space. Are we doing checks to ensure that the material used to lay replacement of the earth, is it the correct material with the current stage? Is, for reducing flood, you know what I'm saying? I'm not, it's totally cold to see through it.
Permeable.
Yeah, permeable, thank you. And the very quick supplementary that goes with.
No.
It goes.
What's the question?
Goes with the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
And?
And with that, what I've also noticed a lot of where it's been done, there's not drop curbs, so which suggests it's not done with planning permission or with permission. Are we looking at that as well? Thank you, Chair.
Good question.
So yes, your second question was going to be my answer to your first question, which is broadly the Highways Authority and the Planning Authority don't tend to give permission. So where it has been done, it's already been done in an unauthorised way, and then it would be a matter for planning enforcement to look into where that has been done. And obviously, if it's not been done with permission, then we can't put any conditions on that permission. So yeah, we don't have any way of controlling what material is used.
Nate?
I actually have 3 questions on.
Hey, you got one question, haven't you? What's the best question you're going to ask out of your 3?
You've just got to laugh.
I mean, this is really I'm literally a Green Party councillor, Chair.
And I'm playing with you, pulling your leg.
Okay, I'll ask all 3 at once to make things easier.
In normal way, go on, all 3 at once.
The first question is, do we have a response to the CPRE's call for 2 new parks in Newham, which was their response to our draft 18 local plan?
Second question.
Second question is, if I remember reading correctly, there are quite good policies around ensuring tree lining on sort of new streets, but I don't know if it's as good for, like, Newham has quite low tree coverage, and how do we use the local plan as a tool to improve that on existing streets? And then the third question is, in the context of the Beckton Park Master Plan that was approved at Cabinet today, what is the strategy is there a strategy in the local plan around delivering a city farm in Newham?
Okay, right. First question is on
It's,
the man writing.
there was a advocacy.
New parks in Newham. So I can do slightly better than that, which is that almost every site allocation, and there are 44, going to be 45 site allocations in the local plan, has a requirement to deliver new open space. Not all of those are going to be, large scale parks, because asking a developer to provide a park on a site allocation is one of the most expensive things we can do, because it's very land hungry.
On the 2 new parks, and I haven't seen, does it say 2 new parks must be of 50 hectares?
Saying 2 new parks, they're saying 2 new parks, they actually mean 70 hectares of new space. So I don't know if it delivers.
The 45 development, does it add up to
70?
Yeah.
So almost.
Okay.
So it adds up to a sufficient. So when we did this very extensive green water space infrastructure study, we looked at how much open space there is per head of population in Newham now, and if it were to stay the same, how much there would be per head of population at the end of the plan period. And we've committed to it, and there would be a significant drop, obviously, because it's going to be lots more homes, lots more people, and not necessarily any more green space unless we allocate for it. So the plan has committed to maintaining the same per head of population amount of green space throughout the plan period. And that is almost, let me just get my.
So that does leave us in the position of being.
Hey, hold on. Could there be an opportunity? Because there's a really good answer you gave there. In order, we got the CPRE, they did their, call it their press release, but there's an answer from yourself. Perhaps is there an opportunity for you to sort of bang out a press release and saying how we're meeting that need?
I can absolutely provide an answer.
But
I'll pick that up.
Yeah, it's not now, but I think Nate raised a really good point. There's an organisation saying we need 2 new parks, and you, by some clever planning, there's a requirement we might meet that need, right? So
Not just clever planning, it's kind of like an ambition.
yeah.
I guess just before we get a little bit too celebratory, maintaining our current position maintains us as worst boroughs in London for
Point made, Nate. And the second point on tree lining.
So tree lining, so the Woodlands Trust actually provided a very nice submission to our Reg 18 consultation, where they said they really liked our policies. So there you go, in terms of the ambition in the local plan for trees. On existing streets, it's a bit more challenging because we can't, unless a new development is happening, we can't place conditions to require new trees to come forward. But we do use some of the money that we receive, for example, through the carbon offset fund to pay for new trees on existing streets. So for
Use silver for that.
I've got you, Susan. Can I ask a question? Do we still have a tree officer?
We do have.
we do have a tree officer, yes.
Does he or she go around or them go around and plant trees in spots?
To be fair, we wouldn't know the exact detail. This will be a question to the environment
Okay,
team. There is a tree officer. There is a maintenance program of all of our trees, and there is also a program around planting saplings.
Okay.
But I don't know
okay, fine.
any more detail beyond that.
I can
Good.
speak as a, if I may speak as a resident for a minute.
Yeah.
I know that Rachel, who's
Yeah,
here, she's one of my ward councillors. Emailing us saying, please tell us if you've got an empty tree pit in your road, and I will help make sure that that tree pit
Okay.
is refilled with a new tree.
could I,
All of that can be done. There is a challenge, as Ellie says, with if there is a road that doesn't have any tree pits to start with, obviously retrospectively creating those may have challenges associated with whatever's already under the pavement, etc.
fair one, good question. And the third question is there an animal offer at the Beckton master plan? It's either,
That wasn't the question. The question was in the context.
I can quite simply answer this one, which is that effectively green space is protected in its entirety and is sought in its entirety. What happens on it isn't really for the local plan.
Okay.
We wouldn't,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be in a position to
move on to
require there to be.
next.
Yeah.
Nate, no, Bedford,
I would like.
Nate,
I'm going to do the chair.
Bedford goes, right?
Yeah, but I asked the question and the mayor would like to answer it.
There, be brief, please.
I was just going to say, Chair, with respect to Councillor Nate Higgins, and again, another question, and we can get a response from the environment team. That's the best directorate to be asking that question, okay?
Thank you for that, Nate. Tony,
Yes, we were told something in terms of flood protection and prevention. Our drainage and gullies is not always clear and we clean and maintenance. And secondly, we were told that
what's the question, Tony?
Chair, give me a time.
No, Chair, we haven't got a lot of time, Tony, for preambles or context. Chair, I'll move, if you talk over me, I'll go to the next question. I will not afford you. You could have asked, Tony, you could have answered the question in the time it's taken me to correct you. Answer your question. I don't want to be, Tony, I will move off if you answer your question.
What prevention measures are we putting in place to prevent flooding of our roads?
Thank you. Questions given. Answer, please.
In terms of what planning can do, part of the issue around flooding of drains is that we have a kind of dual drainage system where sewage and rainwater flow into the same drain. So when it rains very heavily, then you get a huge surge of rainwater into those existing drains. We also have a lot of hard surface, so that's part of the issue about paving over gardens for parking, etc. The new local plan is requiring new developments to have much more soft landscaping, permeable landscaping, so that rainwater drains straight through into the ground and into the water table and not into the drains. And it's also requiring separate drainage systems, so separate one for rainwater to the sewage network. So again, alleviate pressure on the sewage network.
Thank you. Susan.
Thank you. Really, really quick questions. Firstly, in terms of planting trees on roads, what controls are there over what trees you get? With the problems in my area of a female ginkgo that's really upset people. I'm just interested.
Female ginkgo.
It's a tree, yeah.
Smelly food.
Oh, right, okay.
And then the second thing is, I note the requirement to deliver parks, but what controls are there over the size of them? I'm sure we've all seen developments with utterly pathetic sort of play facilities and parks. So what controls do we have on the size of these parks?
So the trees, there's a broad policy which is about the right tree in the right place in the local plan, and then we would look to the tree officer to be able to provide some guidance on that. And we are also seeking to appoint a new biodiversity officer that would be a shared officer with Redbridge, a new position that we've not had in Newham before, but there's a new legal requirement on us to deliver biodiversity net gain, and this officer will help support us to do that on all sites. And in terms of sizes of parks, we've stipulated the size of the park in the site application. And also that it needs to be a consolidated park, because you won't be surprised to learn that people want to add up a tiny triangle over there and a slightly bigger triangle over there and a bit of path here and call it one park.
There's some really good information given there, and I think, could you take some time to perhaps send us a little short note? Because you mentioned the biodiversity, you mentioned the shared officers. Weybridge is quite interesting. In response to Nate's question on the 2 new parks, there's a creative way of solving that challenge. And I think there's a couple of opportunities there that you could update the committee. And then I'll also say there might be a few press releases or information briefs you might want to write, because I've learned something today listening. I think take the opportunity, and that's really quite useful. I don't know, any final question from the committee? Nate, have you got another question? I feel like I've curtailed your energy tonight.
I'm just thinking through my various things.
Simon, whilst Nate's thinking.
Yeah, as a sort of add-on to Tony's question with regard to drainage clearing and stuff, I think what he was actually getting at was how often and how are we maintaining to keep our drainages free? Because obviously, when obviously trees drop and stuff, extra things go into.
I think that's an environmental highways question. So let's take it away as an action. And can the environmental team supply us a service level agreement, how they clean and maintain our gullies in Newham, please? Your question?
Yeah, I've got my question. I think we're all starting to understand that as a borough, we need to be talking more about climate resilience than preventing climate change, because it's coming, increased temperatures. How is the local plan dealing with, sorry, let me start this again. There's been really positive development on making new homes much better insulated than previous homes. And we're actually maybe starting to run into another problem of actually these homes can be
too hot,
really quite difficult to exist in during the summer, especially with working from home. I remember during COVID trying to find film that I could stick on my window that would try and reflect the heat away, because it was that desperate. Many people will be turning to air conditioning to try and deal with this problem. That has consequences. How are we dealing with this?
Last question.
So we actually commissioned a specific bit of evidence base to look at the problem of overheating and what the local plan could do about it. And it's quite complicated because the technical definition of overheating is quite stringent. And I think lots of us would consider a lower bar as being quite uncomfortable in our homes before the government guidance would suggest that it is technically overheating. That's the first problem we ran into. The second issue is that the government has issued some, which is helpful, some new building regulations about overheating. But quite often when the government does that, they then say, this is now outside the purview of planning, sorted by building regs. But building regs come along quite late on in that process. And the best things that you can do for overheating are right from the beginning, about the orientation of the building, the design in terms of flow of air, what the materials that it's made of. So we have got a new policy in the plan, which we are hoping to get passed and inspected despite those challenges, which require developers to undertake an overheating kind of checklist to look at the design of the building and demonstrate that it won't cause significant overheating.
Single/dual aspect as important as people sort of, should we essentially be saying that there shouldn't be any single aspect properties, or?
Well, definitely not single aspect properties with certain orientation, but that, all of this is a balance. Planning is all a balance. If you've got smaller units and you want to make the best use of your available land, sometimes single aspects are the only way that you can still deliver much needed homes. But on the whole, yes, dual aspects
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Really good session tonight. I think in terms of what we've taken away, I think it's a really good discussion on, for example, Muslim burial space, and there's a commitment to provide a sort of a position note and what's going forward. There's also, I think, a commitment to look at how we use the forthcoming start the consultation in June by Cabinet to engage again with the faith communities. Question on student housing from Nate, and obviously look at
It's actually about graduate housing.
graduate housing, sorry. We're gonna look at whether we can incorporate that on the 21st. If not, Nate, gonna invite you to write and we'll get you a full answer, because I think you need that full answer. There's an issue on black churches, and there's a debate there about whether they're whether the list is updated or not, but I think there's an issue about the churches themselves coming forward and via Anne Easter, Councillor Anne Easter, who's the forum coordinator. And there's a really good last session there on biodiversity. I think there's some updating coming from the environmental team there. I think there's opportunities from us as a council, really like the shared officer with Redbridge. That's a press release there. And the other angle, how we deal with the CPRE 2 Parks Challenge. And we're doing something, I think there's an opportunity to get out there. Have I summarise? You put your hand up, Susan, we've got about 7 minutes.
No, I'm just gonna throw something into the mix for next time.
Go on.
High streets and 15-minute neighbourhoods.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
okay,
It's in planning terms,
yeah,
because I mean, certainly we can talk about the designation that will enable high streets, but there are two aspects.
okay,
There's the regeneration team, community wealth building place, and
yeah. Susan, can I ask, but outside of this space, we sit down and define exactly.
That's the key lines that I can put in.
Yeah, get set up. Okay, I really like that. Was a really good meeting there. Hope I haven't taken your energy, Nate, by restricting you.
No, I think, by the way, the final sort of thing for us to keep in our mind is timeline versus the general election and sort of which government we're going to be trying to get approval from for this local plan. And yeah, I think we need to keep that in our mind.
yeah, I'm
Right,
gonna
you're
bet
right.
that it's a Labour government.
Yeah, but the majority might be interesting. Okay, right. Night for the, Mayor, John, Ellie, Vicky, are there any comments, reflections, observations from you guys?
I've got one reflection, and this is not meant to be a provocation, but really something for us to collectively think about, and I'd really welcome some thoughtfulness around this. And this goes to the graduate accommodation point. I was just thinking, as you were saying it, in the context of Newham and given our community characteristics and also its youthfulness, we've got a tendency towards households that are multi-generational, of colour, where young people grow up in extended family networks, stay at home, go to university in London, yet are quite keen to move out of the family home but can't afford it. And there's something equally important about that when we think about graduates. Graduates are not just young people from outside of Newham or London coming to London to study. So I think there's something quite interesting around how do you ensure equity if there was a product that could be developed that was sufficiently viable as a product for a developer or council to be exploring. Just something to think about.
Can I thank, any final comment before we conclude? Vicky,
Sorry, this is a quite unlike me question
go on.
about process. Just wanted to clarify if we're coming back again with another session as suggested to clear up some final matters. Is that simply a session as part of a regular CERS meeting? Or are we saying that we're extending the local plan task and finish group for another meeting?
Okay, let me take the technical bureaucratic question away, and we'll find the most appropriate and easy way to do it. How's that as a response? And make it easy for you.
That, because Chair, if I may, that would be really helpful, because I know that we're going to be jumping on strategic housing delivery and there's come to us for consideration.
I think there's a number of things. I think we need to balance off your time, meeting time. So let us take that away and come up with the most equitable way of getting that fit. But also it's about giving you the opportunity to inform us with the appropriate information.
My final thing, I think it is quite important for it to be part of this task and finish because we have been worth it. We need a report, and I think that this stuff will influence what we would put in that report. Otherwise, we just kind of sat around and had conversations. It needs to inform.
Let's let officers take, they've heard, let them take away, come up with the right structure and the format and that sort of, so they've heard our express wishes. So we can take away, come up with a next
And
solution, correct?
And Chair, just one thing, just again picking up on the point that's been raised by Councillor Nate Higgins, and with an eye to when Regulation 19 will be published for further consultation, it probably would be helpful, but again, I will need to speak with Ellie outside of this meeting in Customs. If there was to be a conclusions report from this task and finish group, probably be better if we can have it either presented as part of the scrutiny annual report or just before the annual council meeting.
So can you,
Sounds doable.
the action, can we?
Doesn't it make
find out
sense?
what is the deadline date to include it in the annual scrutiny report?
That might not be possible otherwise. It would just-
Doesn't have to do it now, it's not there.
So it'd be really.
Whether we're able to make changes.
Yeah,
The time.
It's sooner.
Local.
okay.
Actually, we're just consulting with Ellie and Vicky. Even the annual council meeting will be too late. If we could get something ideally by the end of March, that would be really helpful.
The purpose for that being, so then if recommendations emerging from your report that we want to incorporate can go into the Reg 19 version rather than having to be considered as response to the Reg 19 version.
And the scrutiny guide, send you an email, so we formally find out what date you need it by.
Yeah.
So if you go back tomorrow and it's the 14th, not the 16th, let's get that.
Yeah. And it will be considering because some of the recommendations just might not be viable, and we'll provide you reasons why. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
On tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Really enjoyable. They gone.
Yeah, meeting closed at 9:27.